let's talk about money. I mean, we use it every single day, right? But have you ever really truly stopped to think about what it is? Because it's not just paper or numbers on a screen. The story of how we got here, well, it's one of the most incredible, surprising, and just plain insane stories in all of human history. I want you to picture this. You walk into your favorite coffee shop tomorrow morning, but instead of tapping your phone, you gotta haul a live goat onto the counter to pay for your latte, right? The barista's freaking out, the goat is definitely not happy, and all you want is your coffee. It sounds completely ridiculous, but for most of human history, that's kind of how trade worked. So the big question is, what happened? How on earth did we make that massive jump from trading actual physical stuff, like goats and grain, to this invisible, abstract world of digital money? Well, that's where the story gets really good. It is one wild ride. To understand money, we have to start in a world that didn't have any. The very first system we ever used was called barter, which, is really just a fancy word for straight-up trading. The whole idea is super simple. I've got apples, you've got shoes, I need shoes, you're craving apples. We swap. Everybody's happy. And for small, simple communities, this worked, for a while. But as societies got bigger and more complex, some huge problems started to pop up. The whole system of bartering starts to fall apart for a few key reasons. The biggest one, by far, is something called the double coincidence of wants. Think about it. You have to find someone who not only has the exact thing you want, but also wants the exact thing you have. Good luck with that. Then there's the problem of indivisibility. I mean, how do you get change from a live cow? You can't just saw it in half. Plus, your wealth could literally rot if it's grain or die if it's livestock. It was a total mess. Okay, so clearly humanity needed a better way. And the first major breakthrough was to stop trading everything for everything else and instead agree on one specific thing that everybody would accept as payment. This was the birth of what we call commodity money. Now here's the crucial part. These weren't just symbolic tokens. Commodity money was stuff that was useful all on its own. It had its own, what they call intrinsic value. And because everyone knew it was useful, everyone was willing to accept it in trade. And you won't believe some of the stuff people used. I mean, all over the world, we see these pop up. In parts of China and Africa, beautiful little cowrie shells were basically cash. In colonial America, tobacco was a standard form of currency. And in ancient Rome, one of the most valuable commodities wasn't gold or silver. It was something you definitely have in your kitchen right now: salt. Yeah, salt. It was incredibly valuable back then because it was the main way to preserve food. In fact, Roman soldiers were often paid part of their wages in pure salt. That payment was known as a salarium. And if that word salarium sounds familiar, it should. That is the direct origin of our modern word salary. So every time you get a paycheck, you are connected to a Roman legionary getting paid in a bag of salt. How cool is that? So commodity money was a huge step up, for sure. But it wasn't perfect. I mean, carrying around giant blocks of salt or bushels of tobacco isn't exactly convenient. We needed something more durable, more portable, and easier to divide. The answer? Metal. And get this, the very first steps toward what we think of as coins happened in China. Around 1200 BC, they started trading miniature bronze replicas of tools and weapons instead of the real things. And eventually, for safety, they were like, you know what, let's just make these round. And boom, the first metal coins. But the real game-changing idea, a government-guaranteed currency, that was perfected around 600 BC in the Kingdom of Lydia, which is in modern-day Turkey. Their king, a guy named Alyattes, had this brilliant thought. He was like, hey, instead of weighing lumps of gold and silver for every single trade, why don't we pre-weigh them and stamp them with my official seal? And this right here is the absolute key. That little stamp, usually a lion's head, was a personal guarantee from the king. It meant you didn't have to check the weight or purity of the metal anymore. You just had to trust the stamp. Trust shifted from the metal itself to the government that issued the coin. This was a revolution. It standardized value, which supercharged trade and helped build the first great empires. So coins were an amazing invention, but they had one big, heavy problem. As trade empires grew, merchants had to move huge amounts of wealth, and carrying chests overflowing with gold and silver, that was not only a hassle, it basically put a giant target on your back for every pirate and thief around. And guess who solved this problem first? Yep, once again, China was way ahead of the curve. They invented the first forms of paper money around 500 BC. But the idea didn't make its way to Europe for more than 1,000 years, until explorers like Marco Polo saw it and brought the totally mind-blowing concept back with them. So here's how it got started in Europe. A merchant would take his super heavy gold coins to a trusted goldsmith for safekeeping. In return, the goldsmith would give him a paper receipt, basically an IOU, saying, yep, you own this much gold. Pretty soon, merchants realized it was way easier and a heck of a lot safer to just trade the paper receipts themselves instead of the actual gold. That piece of paper now represented the value of the gold. For centuries, this was how it worked. Paper money had value because it was a direct claim on something real, usually gold, sitting in a vault somewhere. But as the world economy got more and more complex, being tied to a limited supply of gold just wasn't flexible enough. And so in the 20th century, the world took the final and most abstract leap of all. We moved to a system of what's called fiat money. Fiat is Latin for let it be done. A dollar bill today isn't backed by gold or anything physical. It's valuable for one reason and one reason only, because the government says it is, and, crucially, because we all believe that it is. Its value is based on nothing more than our shared trust in the system. It's not a thing anymore. It's just an idea. So let's just recap that journey real quick. We went from commodity money, which had its own value, like salt, to representative money, which was a piece of paper that represented something valuable, like gold, all the way to fiat money, like the dollar, which is valuable simply because we have collective faith in it. And that brings us to right now, because this evolution, it hasn't stopped. In fact, it's speeding up. We are living through the next great monetary shift, the move from physical atoms to digital bits. I want you to really think about this staggering fact. The vast majority of all the money in the world, we're talking over 90% of it, doesn't exist as cash or coins. It's just a series of ones and zeros on a bank's computer server. We've gone from trading cows to trading invisible data. So here it is, the entire incredible journey on one timeline. We start with simple bartering over 11,000 years ago. We move to shells, then the revolutionary Lydian coins, then to paper money. We fast forward all the way to 1971, when the US officially left the gold standard, kicking off our modern fiat era. And then 2009, with the invention of Bitcoin, which introduced this radical new idea of a decentralized digital currency, totally separate from any government or bank. It really makes you think, doesn't it? Money has never been one single thing. It's always been an evolving technology designed to solve a problem. So this brings us to one final fascinating question to leave you with. If our current digital system went offline tomorrow, no banks, no credit cards, no internet, what would you use to trade? What would become the new money?